I will not deal with this because it's already been dealt with in terms of this, the primary legislation in South Africa being the South African Space Affairs Act, which provides authority to the council to license space activities in the country. There's another act that deals with information, mainly spatial information, the Spatial Data Infrastructure Act. It's a very detailed act. It determines, the manner of acquiring data, how data should be stored, and how it should be processed, analyzed, and how it should be disseminated. It's only spatial data, not necessarily remote sensing. However, as we are dealing with Earth observation, this is with application to how we are conducting our business as EO members. So there was a good presentation here yesterday about the gentleman from the NGI. Some of those activities, some of us are not aware because we are not actually working in the field. But what has come out of that discussion, the presentation by Mr. Aslam, is that the requirement for the infrastructure called SASDI, that will then be an incubator that will acquire imagery, has been merged with another part which is now called NGI. And as we will see later on, NGI has got the same function as another structure created by the South African National Space Agency Act, which is the SANSA EO data center. They've got the same functions. They acquire satellite, they acquire imagery, process it and distribute it. To who? Organs of state. So there's now a problem in terms of the way the legislation in regard to the acquisition of data is structured in the country, that Mr. Aslam has indicated yesterday that there's now duplication of effort there, because while there were more aerial, they are more now looking into remote sensing data to a great extent. So when we look at all that, at our national legislative framework, we now make a comparative analysis with the other countries that have got remote sensing capabilities or don't, whether they've got formal laws or policies relating to the acquisition, use and dissemination of data. There are general trends that we've observed. And in a study done by Professor Gabrinowitz of the University of Mississippi, Center for National Remote Sensing, they covered almost the whole countries that have got anything remotely dealing with remote sensing. They found that there are very few countries that have formal law on remote sensing. Many countries have got policies, but there's a problem in terms of how those policies are being implemented. The UN principles of non-discriminatory and free access, not free access, non-discriminatory access are being narrowly construed, because now the sense state doesn't have a carte blanche in terms of acquiring the imagery that it should get as soon as that information, as soon as data, as soon as remote sensing imagery is available according to UN principles. It must be made available to the sense state. Now there are restrictions in EO policies of many countries. There has to be approval. There's a committee. There's a minister who determines, what kind of information you can get. Not necessarily what kind of information, but actually who is requesting it. Under the Turin Treaty, which is France and Italy, they've come together and determined the policy in regard to how satellite imagery is going to be acquired. They have to degrade and declassify the information first before they can give it to anybody else. India says resolutions, the decisions have to be based on the resolution of the imagery to be acquired. For instance, if it's 8 meters, it's okay, but if it's 1 meter, then to be screened, who is acquiring it, for what purpose? The US, Germany, the major primary issue is, will the information that is provided compromise national security? All these considerations were not contained in the UN principles. But now there is a little bit of a change because most of the EO space segments are now owned by the government, and there's more general trend towards free access. So we looked at some few jurisdictions, but in the interest of time, we'll just go through them quickly. For instance, in Australia, there's an act similar to ours, but there's an agent there of the Australian government. It provides data for free, but if it's on CD or manipulated in some way, then it's for sale. Brazil, China, they've got their own national space law, which is general in application. However, when it deals with the acquisition of remote sensing data, there's the CIBERS agreement that I think South Africa, through the Sunsites, is already part of that. The CIBERS agreement specifies the need for a license, how much, the imagery or the downlinks, should cost, and in general, those are the kinds of issues that we're dealing with in regard to remote sensing. So from the South African side, then there's a need, maybe through the whole process of the study and the review of the Space Affairs Act, to actually look into a consideration of promulgating a specific remote sensing law that deals with the specific requirements of the user community, that will specify exactly on what conditions should data be acquired, how should it be processed, and how should it be disseminated. And moreover, there is a need to harmonize the diverse diverse agencies that are now under the Act, the Special Data Infrastructure Act, the SANSA Act, because mainly these are government institutions. They're funded by the fiscus as to, is there a need to streamline exactly who is empowered to be the receptacle of data information from the various space segments that we are presently utilizing. So in short, there is a need to look at specifically a national domestic space remote sensing legislation to deal with user and service provider requirements. And I thank you.